Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out ProRevenge. Story 1. Keep kicking myself and other students off our remote desktop link for the heck of it. Enjoy the consequences. This is a repost after a small issue with Rule 6 that resulted in the original being taken down, and has now been rectified. Thank you mods. Please also read thoroughly before commenting. It's really r/facepalm worthy the number of stupid. Story 2. Client tried to screw me by locking me out of my own system. Edit. Since so many people assume this happened in the States, I just wanted to say that I'm from a small country in Europe. The laws and regulations here are different than in the States. We have a government agency here that has everything to do with registering companies, and they do keep track of who's who. If you are a serial startup guy who leaves nothing but burnt ashes behind you, you cannot do it here. You have to register the owner and members of the board of the company if there is one. If you have a prior history of failed companies or you've broken the law in some regard, you are blacklisted at that establishment. First post, so be gentle with me. I've worked as an independent contractor in the IT field for over 20 years, doing all manner of things from creating simple HTML sites to managing a big hotel's complete IT infrastructure. One of the many clients I had back in the day I was coding big-ish custom websites was a rental company. Now I had heard a lot of warnings about not working with this guy that owned it. He had a reputation that he was sharp as a tack, backstabbing, and conniving. He was a lawyer after all. So, I went into the partnership with that in mind. He wanted a new website for his renting gig, where people would list their home for rent. Renters would sign up and pay a subscription to the site, and he would get the whole lot, nothing out of the ordinary there. So we make a pretty good deal on paper, we sign it, and I get started on the project. Coding everything in PHP goes well, but he demands suddenly that I show him progress only a week into the progress. He wants to see the website front now. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I tried explaining to him that the front-end work isn't scheduled to start until after 6 weeks of back-end programming and that I only had pure code to show right now. The contract we signed clearly states this. He then gets on his high horse and demands that I put everything on hold to do the front-end first, design and then program. I, being really young at the time and fairly naive, agree to this without asking for it to be added to the contract as an addendum and start working on the design now. The contract stated that I was given free rein of the design science as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the same logo on the site. So I make a fast draft in Fireworks. This was back when it was a Macromedia product, before the Adobe acquisition, and within 2 days I show him. He's not impressed and demands a different direction and sets up a list of demands. I, as always, aim to please the customer and do just what he wants. I design a new layout, with his list of demands, but he doesn't like that either. That's how the next 3 months go. A never-ending circle where he is never happy with anything. Now close to 4 months into the project, he demands to see a working showcase of the backend. I point out that he himself changed the order in how the project was being done and had demanded that I do the front-end design first instead of the backend as stated in the contract, which he now turns on me and says, yes, the contract we both signed says you will have a working backend to show me at the end of the month. If you don't honor that, I will have to take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your lack of professionalism. Okay, I now have 12 days to do a backend for the site. So I get a friend to help me and we work tirelessly through a weekend and I have a good base to work from in 9 days. Mind you, at this point he has only paid the security on the contract, about 5% of the total price, and has shielded himself from paying by hiding behind, well, if you can't honor the contract, why should I? Finish XX work and then I'll pay as per the contract. Remembering now, all the warnings I had heard about this guy, I decide to add a special function to the code just to be safe, more on that later. So, now it's the end of the month, we have a front-end design he is okay with, a backend that has been finished to about 85% of what is required according to the contract, and I still have 1 month left to finish everything else. Time for a show and tell. Since I was working on this development, I was running it on my own dev server and showed him this in a browser on his computer. I mentioned to him that since I only had 512 kbit/s upstream from the server, it might lag a little, but it wouldn't when it would be put on the productional server he has his website on at his hosting company. He says that's okay and the demonstration goes on. As I'm showing him the site, both front-end and back-end, I can see he's immensely happy with it, although he would never say so out loud. He is trying to hide his smile that pops up regularly and his eyes gleam with all the added ways he can now start making money from. Anyway, he now says that it's way too slow, this is wrong, that is wrong. Blah blah blah. Client, I want you to put it up on my prod server and see how the speed is. Me, okay, no problem, I can make that happen. Please pay 50% of the contract and I'll get right on it. Okay. I wait a few days and then I get an email from him where he includes a forwarded message from the bank detailing a transaction from him to me to the amount of the 50% I asked for. So I push the system to his prod server so he can take a look at it, under beta.hisdomain.tld, I then send him an email stating that he can try the system with the supplied credentials. What he doesn't know is that I knew he had been fishing around for another programmer to do this project, to pick up from a lazy deadbeat who couldn't do anything right. So I knew he would most likely try to screw me. What I also suspected was that the email he sent me with the transaction proof was a fake, which it ended up being. ProRevenge 1. Remember that small function I mentioned? Well, what it did was if user X, his user, tries to remove user Y, my admin, from the system without one setting being changed in the config first, the system will first delete and purge the database and then remove all the documents in the webroot. Well, not 5 minutes after he reads the email from me, he does just that. He tries to delete my admin user from the system to lock me out. Guess who has nothing of the project left? He does. ProRevenge 2. Since it is considered forgery to spoof an email, especially from a bank, I sent the information to the authorities and he goes under investigation by both the police and the bank lawyers. ProRevenge 3. I sold the system to a competitor of his for a better price than originally contracted to him, and last I knew he was now blacklisted from owning a company as well as he lost his right to work as a lawyer. I only got that 5% he paid at the beginning, and for working for just over 5 months on this project that is hardly anything. But the knowledge of his demise will keep my heart warm for the rest of my life. Story 3. Torture a student and lose your whole career in the process. Hi Redditors! First post and long-time reader. This happened to me at a healthcare facility a few years ago. I work in a healthcare facility with different disciplines and we have the main clinicians and assistants as well that do treatment. For the longest time before COVID, clinicians would take students from schools because they need to have some hand-on experience before they graduate and get to take their state exams. The players of this are OP me Dory, clinician teacher Hannah, student Casey, another clinician Katie, my regional manager. So I am the supervisor of the health clinic and am in charge of all clinicians. Even though they're fairly independent, they have to report to me and I in turn report for the whole clinic. This starts with Dory. She has a lot of friends in one of the prominent universities here. She's very well connected with them, she graduated from there. Is involved with their activities and just active in the school in general. I have known Dory for years and have worked with her before, but she was never directly under my management because her home clinic was another location she would just help out. I would hear things about her. The way she treated the assistants that worked under her, a rudeness towards other clinicians, and some sketchy stuff about basically fraud of billing for services not rendered. This is a big no in healthcare, but it happens more than you think. Anyway, I had no proof of this and all the patients at my clinic had not voiced any complaints. Anyway, Dory had started taking students in and she was moved at my clinic. When she came there, she was still helping at another clinic not too far away. Dory accepted a student from her university to follow her and learn from her and slowly integrate into clinical treatment. This is where Hannah entered into the picture. Very shy girl, did everything you asked of her, but because she was shy and also being a new student she's unsure if the treatment she is administering is the appropriate one. That's why you have people like Dory to be next to you and counsel and guide you. After the first few weeks I started noticing Hannah would be in the clinic and would be doing treatments without Dory being around for a few HRS. This isn't allowed because the instruct should be around at all times to supervise their students. After a few times of noticing this, I brought Dory and H into my office and said this cannot happen and is not allowed. If it happens again I would have to report it, and this was not something I wanted to do. If I did report it, the student would lose their clinical placement and would have to wait 6 months until the next placement, which pushes back the graduating date. A few weeks go by and things had been fairly normal. The student would be in the clinic sooner but would not be performing treatment. She would however shadow other clinicians. But Dory was still coming in later than usual. One day as I'm walking by Hannah I see her that she's on the billing menu. In order to be on that screen you would have to be clocked in, otherwise the system won't allow you to do it. I call her to my office again and I sternly tell her that I had specifically said she couldn't treat patients and she doesn't have a clock in username and password. Hannah proceeded to tell me that Dory had told her to clock in for her and start billing patients before services were rendered. Continues to state this had been going on for the whole time she had been a student. Now I don't see the billing until the next day, but I don't have a clock of when the billing was submitted. I tell Hannah that this was strictly not allowed, but I need more information before I make a decision. I call Casey, the other clinicians, into my office and she proceeds to tell me that the Hannah goes home crying and bawling every single night due to Dory threatening to fail her as a student, if she didn't do all these things for her. Dory had used her leverage in her school to strong-arm H into doing all her work while she wasn't even there. I asked H if this was true and she said yes it was. H then goes to tell me that after the first meeting with Dory, Hannah, and OP on what they shouldn't be doing, Dory brought Hannah to the side and told her he's cool, he knows what's really going on, but he has to say that as a manager, so keep doing it. At this point I asked the student if any of her evaluation or letters of progress had been submitted to her school so they know she has been making progress. Hannah says that Dory has never submitted the necessary paperwork to the school and has gotten away with it because of her connections to the school. So if I fired Dory, she would in turn take revenge on the student and fail her at her clinical. She would be 6 months to a year from being placed into another clinic, meaning she would be either very late of just fail and not be able to graduate. I called Katie and reported everything to her, told her my fear for the student and the constant trauma she was going through every day, crying, being threatened and retaliated against. Katie was also fearful of this but also worried the liability this put on the company, also how long it had been going on. So she didn't have an answer on how to handle the situation without harming the student. So here was my revenge. I started watching everything Dory did, treatments, time and complaints etc. One weekend Dory had to work without her student on a Saturday, Sunday and Monday. When I come in on Monday I notice a patient having been to the hospital since Friday but she had still been billed for services. I checked the clinician, it was Dory. How was she able to treat a person that wasn't even in the clinic and also be able to bill her? So I had my reasons to fire her. I had the evidence I needed but I still wanted a bit more. I texted Dory and asked if she had seen said patient, she reported yes she had. But also asked if she had billed less than what she should have because she would be able to bill more if I wanted. I told her that wasn't necessary and there was no way to bill more due to the patient being in the hospital the whole weekend she had billed. She knew from that moment what was going to happen. The next day OP and Katie waited for Dory and she was fired on the spot, just for the fraud. The student thing never came up in conversation and she had no idea we had known for a while. I had another clinician write up a whole letter on what the student was doing and that she was a good clinician and has completed the necessary work to be able to graduate. Dory was unable to get any more work after that because the incident had been reported to the government and had that on her license wherever she went. Her new employers would look at the license and not want to hire someone with that on their record. Last I heard she was working at an Amazon warehouse as a manager. From a doctorate degree to warehouse manager, after many years I'm sure of fraud and abuse. The best part is that student has graduates gotten her degree, and is working in the field. She's a great clinician, has done great work in her field, and I still keep in contact with her. She is very thankful for being pulled out of that situation. TLDR. A clinician in my clinic forces her student to do everything for her, including her billing and clocking her in and out. Meanwhile, fraudulent billing by the clinician leads to her being fired. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.